Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Eljay Johnsen Show. This show airs every single Saturday at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Time. Nuts, messed it up again. Unless there is some sort of variation or change, which I will let you guys know on Twitter. So go ahead and head on over to Twitter at the Eljay Johnsen. That's with an E, not an O, but I'm talking about the second O, which is now an E. Okay, anyway, you can probably see it. Where I'll give updates pertaining to the show and guest announcements every Tuesday. Also, make sure if you want to send in any questions through email and make sure that I absolutely do see them, feel free to email me at ljjohnson@gmail.com. Otherwise, feel free to tweet using the hashtag The Eljay Johnsen Show during this live recording. Alright, that's enough Eljay Johnsons. Let's go ahead and get on to the introduction. Legend foretold of two brothers that would one day be born into the world, one of the Oni and one of the dragon. They would clash and fight, and eventually, one of the Oni, it's the dragon. It's one of the two of them would have a son, and that son would then bring together the secret ninja hang on, sorry, that's the wrong script. No, okay, sorry, new script. So, legend foretold of two brothers that would come together to make one of the most entertaining and informative LEGO channels you have ever seen. I am, of course, talking about the fantastic and informative Beyond the Brick. And today I am sitting down with one of its co-founders, Joshua Hanlon. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, LJ, and I think I like the first introduction was pretty great as well. I think that works as well. But also, time zones are a tricky thing, so don't worry about that. I think I've given up on them at this point.
Yeah, fair enough. It's I've heard arguments for just completely doing away with time zones, but part of me is like, that might make it more confusing, but I don't know.
Exactly.
We'll see. So, let's waste no more time and get into it. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself, who you are, how you got into LEGO, and a little bit about Beyond the Brick.
Sounds good. So I am Joshua Hanlon, and I am the founder and host of Beyond the Brick, which started originally in 2015 as an audio-only podcast, very similar to this show that we're talking on today, and then built over the years to primarily what we do now, which is I travel around with my brother John, and we travel to LEGO conventions around the world and interview builders in person at conventions about what they build and kind of what inspires them and the story behind their creations. And so that build up from 2015 to today to where it is now, and we're almost at 300,000 subscribers on YouTube and I think about 115 million views. So it's been some incredible growth and great support from the community over the years. As far as a little bit more about myself personally, as far as LEGO building, I have been building with LEGO pretty much as long as I can remember. I have a couple older brothers, so there was LEGO in my house before I was even born, and I just grew up building with it and playing with it all the time. A lot of great memories of kind of just filling the living room floor with all sorts of pirates and Imperial sets and old Western sets and all sorts of fun themes like that, and building, big villages and cities and towns and anything you can imagine like that. All the great stuff that you can do with LEGO as a kid like that, and just let your imagination run wild. And so I grew up playing with it, and then as I got older, into my teenage years, I got more involved in kind of the online LEGO community, found sites like The Brothers Brick, Toys and Bricks, Brickset, a lot of those great sites like that, FBTB, and got more involved online before I then started the podcast when I was 15.
Wow, that is quite the tale. Okay, so I guess that is a little bit of a misconception that I had. You're not just the co-founder, you've started the entire thing. This didn't start as a dual venture?
Right, exactly. So it's actually kind of a crazy story there at the beginning. So I kind of had this idea and knew that I wanted to start a LEGO podcast and cover news and interview builders that primarily started at the beginning as actually talking about LEGO news, and then transitioned into talking to builders more as we found out that that's kind of what people were most interested in. And so when I had the idea, I'd never been to a convention before, didn't really know any AFOLs or anything like that. It's just something I knew that would be fun to do this podcast, and something I knew I wanted to start. And so I started Googling online for kind of LEGO communities and lugs, and finding LEGO user group websites and found a few different ones, one up in Michigan that I emailed a guy just kind of out of the blue and said, hey, here's who I am. I want to start this podcast. You want to do it with me? We talked a little bit back and forth, but he had some conflicts and that didn't work out. Then the guy that I eventually did join me as co-hosting the show when it first started, Rich Schoonover out in Richmond, Virginia. So Rich Lug, I emailed Rich Lug, and he was kind of running their website, and so he got the message, and I said, if anybody here interested in hosting a podcast with me, and he responded and said he would be, and so he was who I started the show with, and then we did about 15 episodes together before Rich had to move on. He just didn't have time anymore, and that's when then Matthew K., who did the show for several years with me, joined me after that. So that's kind of how it happened. It all kind of started out with me just kind of cold emailing, cold calling sort of thing, with just kind of putting the word out there, like, here's my idea for a Lego podcast. Here's what I want to do. Is anybody interested? And just stumbled upon finally someone who would do it with me and kind of take it off the ground with me.
That is fascinating. And yeah, like you mentioned earlier, the channel has exploded. You guys have almost 300,000 subscribers. You very recently hit 250,000. I can imagine that's an incredibly major milestone for you guys.
Yeah, it is. It's just been the last couple of years have especially been amazing since we really started to see incredible growth. Last May, my brother John, who I mentioned I travel around with and do everything with, that does all the kind of editing and video shooting, pretty much all the behind the scenes stuff is done by him. He started doing it full time last May, and so really, especially since then, he's been able to dedicate a lot more time to it, and we've been able to grow it even faster because of that. So yeah, it's passing that like 250,000 subscriber milestone is really kind of insane, and still kind of hard for me to wrap my head around sometimes, because I remember thinking way back at the very beginning of the podcast days, or even before I started the show, just as someone watching YouTube would look at these channels with that many subscribers and think, it'd be cool to have be that big someday, but I don't think we'll ever reach that point. So the fact that we've gotten to where we are today still is kind of blows my mind sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, because you guys really did balloon very, very recently, and it's fantastic, because I don't think that, well, granted, I'm not very well versed in a lot of the LEGO conventions, but I can't recall one that you guys have not covered. Or at least one of the large ones.
Right. Definitely all of the biggest ones in the U.S. for sure we've covered, and we try to even make it to the smaller ones outside. So to me, the big three that I think of are kind of the main ones are BrickCon in Seattle, so that's kind of the big West Coast show, then Brickworld Chicago, kind of the Midwest show, and then Brick Fair Virginia outside of Washington, D.C., kind of the East Coast show. And so you've got kind of biggest in size, as well as kind of biggest for each of the areas of the country they're located in. So those three we've tried to cover. We've been covering all three of those each year for several years now. And then outside of those, we try to hit several other of the smaller shows as well, trying to always expand into as many new shows as possible. So like this year, we're going to Bricks by the Bay in California for the first time. We're going to our first show in Asia, in Japan, in June this year. So we try to hit the main shows every year, as well as always expanding into as many new shows as possible, because we just want to bring as much new content and show what's going on in the community wherever possible.
Absolutely. And that is something that I don't often see pertaining to conventions, and where your guys' content is incredibly unique, because most often people will go to conventions, they'll record, the stuff that they're doing or that they're looking at, take a lot of pictures. But you guys actually take an opportunity, sit down with the creator of certain mocks. Like, I know a friend of mine, Brendan, you guys talked to him about a very large kind of system mech at Brick Fair, Virginia last year. And
I remember that.
Yeah, that's kind of a coverage that I don't know a lot of people really do. And you said that people were kind of looking for that content. And how did that kind of spawn? How did you guys kind of settle in to really looking beyond the brick and at the creator?
Yeah, so going back to, like I mentioned, when we first started the show, it was kind of just focused on news, and we would kind of wrap up that week's, it was weekly episodes, so we kind of wrap up that week's news. And then we transitioned into having like a news section at the beginning of the show and then interviewing a builder for the like last half of the show or last 2/3 of the show. And as we did a few of those episodes, the feedback we got from people online was that those builder interviews was what they were really listening for, and the news was stuff they could get, anywhere else on the countless other, Lego fan sites out there that cover news really well, and wasn't really needed in a weekly podcast form. Mm-hmm. And so we basically transitioned into cutting out all the news and just focusing on whoever the guest we had on the show that week was, whether it was a builder or another YouTuber, whoever it might be. And a lot of that came from both from feedback from people listening, as well as my own interest as I got more involved in the community because of the podcast and talking to people. It was something I also became much more interested in, kind of learning what builders and other people in the community had to say, instead of just kind of recapping the news from whatever sets were released or something like that. So both listener feedback and my own interest, I think, led to us focusing on just the builder interviews. And like you sort of touched on, no one does that kind of coverage at conventions, or as far as kind of trying to get more of that behind the scenes look at why builders build what they build, or what their inspiration is and things like that. So also kind of pulling that out from more of the builders was also a major goal.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And like I said, you guys have gone everywhere. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you even went to a Lego convention in Vietnam? Is that right?
So it was not a Lego convention there, but I did do a kind of a big meetup with a bunch of fans when I was there a few weeks ago in Saigon. I made a video before I went there and said, hey, I'll be traveling around a few different cities in Vietnam. If anyone wants to meet up and get together and kind of chat about Lego, that'd be great. And so there ended up being about 30 people that came out and brought a bunch of builds. So it almost was a small convention, basically, because the amount of builds they brought filled this room we were in a cafe in Saigon. So it was pretty awesome. But yeah, they don't have like an official Lego user group there. They mostly connect through a Facebook group called We Love Lego that kind of keeps all the fans of Vietnam connected. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how they do it. So there's no official shows or official lugs there, but there are a lot of fans there, and they do have kind of monthly meetings where they get together and show some mocks that they built and kind of sets that they've been working on and all of that. So that was fantastic, and I really enjoyed meeting up with the fans in Vietnam.
Yeah, no, that sounds absolutely spectacular. And to be able to do that is really important. I figure that is another question, and one you guys actually do answer in the description, the About section for the Beyond the Brick channel. Funding. Now, obviously, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty. I know that's not exactly something that needs to be out there, but it's mentioned in the About section that this is a full-time job and you guys are able to sustain yourselves on the Beyond the Brick platform. Obviously, coming from a YouTube channel which ended up sort of getting to that point, that's a really, really fantastic thing. So how do you guys kind of manage that? How do you decide what goes into what, and really kind of balance the budgeting for everything that goes in to the content for Beyond the Brick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's it. As you mentioned, just to start off here, it is a fantastic thing when you can kind of take your hobby and something you've poured so much time into over the years and turn it into a business like this that kind of it supports itself, and you aren't instead of using all your money and pouring it into that, it now kind of gives back as well and can support you a little bit. So that is very nice. So yeah, we basically kind of the vast majority of what supports the channel and the money that we use to travel to all these conventions that we go to and do all of our coverage is from YouTube ad revenue. So a lot of people, I'm sure, especially listening to this show, are probably familiar with how that works. Mm-hmm. As far as every view is worth a certain tiny amount of money that if you get enough views adds up to where you're able to support yourself with YouTube. We do also work with some other kind of third-party Lego companies like Bricklink and Brickmania and some of those kind of companies that advertise as well on the channel. So that is also some of the income from the channel comes from those advertisements as well. But the majority is just from the YouTube ad revenue. And yeah, then everything we take, we pour the vast majority back into the channel and traveling to shows. Like I mentioned, we're going to our first show in Asia this year. So stuff like that, we try to always expand as much as possible and and covering as many shows as possible every year. And so that's where most of that money goes back into the travel and convention costs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Okay. I do want to cover, just very briefly before we move on any further, a couple of personal questions regarding you. These are things that I try to remember to ask all my guests. And they're just simple things like, what's your favorite Lego theme? And what's your favorite Lego set?
Yeah, so I have a feeling you might have heard this answer before based on one of your previous guests. But my favorite Lego theme is the Lego Western theme. And then within that theme, it is the Fort Legorado set is my favorite set. Just because of if that sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think one of my prior guests might have given me a very similar answer. Huh.
Kevin Hinkle and I have always had that great bond in common there.
That's fantastic. I mean, Kevin does have great taste, so I guess it seems you do as well. So fair enough.
He really does. But yeah, that's just such a fantastic theme. I think for me, I've always been very interested in history as well as Lego. I've kind of my college and educational background is all in history related fields. So for me, the Western theme kind of combined all the great, cool, like Lego stuff with like a really cool kind of history theme with the Native Americans and the cowboys and the cavalry guys and everything. So it kind of combines all my interests into one thing. And I just always thought that was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I can definitely agree with you on being a fan of history and really looking into it. And a part of me is a little disappointed that Lego has decided not to do a lot more in regards to historical sets, but I totally understand where they're coming from, so I'm not going to complain too much. So, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you guys go to these conventions, now obviously this right now has been a crazy road, an amazing adventure that has led to this point. So I do want to inquire, going to these conventions, having a presence there, where are you guys building toward now? Do you have any other plans for the future as far as avenues for creationist builders, people who mock, and is there a way that you're going to try and interact further with them, or is it mainly conventions? Is that where people are going to find you?
Definitely conventions will be the primary place you'll find us in the future, for sure. We're planning to continue to stick with that. And as far as new stuff, just mostly trying to make it to new conventions we haven't been to and interview new builders is the main goal there. We always do have, fun little interesting side projects, things like that. The Vietnam fan meetup that I mentioned and stuff like that is out kind of outside the zone of the normal just convention coverage that we do. So we always try to keep that sort of stuff coming as well. Also things like going to coverage and fan media days in Billund and things like that, interviewing Lego designers. So that type of coverage that doesn't fall under the typical convention experience is also stuff that we try to bring as much as possible as well. But for the future, definitely continuing to stick with convention coverage and bringing as much of that as possible. It takes a lot of time between traveling to the shows and then coming back and editing all of that content and everything. So that definitely takes just covering the conventions definitely takes the majority of the time.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I completely understand. Okay. Have you guys considered bringing on new talents, new hosts for the show, maybe working up to getting even new series, in a sense, on the channel covering mocks that might not be at conventions? Or is this right now definitely more, heck, even possibly bringing back the podcast? Or is it right now everything's going well, conventions and that personal, in-person, one-on-one conversation? Is that where you guys really, really feel that there's the strongest pull, the strongest draw?
Yeah, I think that is definitely the strongest draw in the poll there is that in-person talking to builders at conventions. I think I prefer that type of like sort of conversation or interview as far as like being able to talk to the person there with their build and have the video going, showing it all and everything. I think is the best way to do that. So for me, that's definitely what I want to focus on. We have worked with some other builders, particularly Boone Langston, if you've seen any of the videos he's created for the channel in the past few months, he's a builder out in Portland, Oregon. He's been doing quite a bit of content for us. He co-hosted the 24-hour live stream, the charity live stream that we do with me. So he's been doing more and more stuff with us, and that's just trying to kind of like you said, create some new different types of content there. Like I said, John and I stay so busy with the convention coverage that things like some sort of like special set reviews, things like that, covering some of the Lego magazines and some of the magazines that are in the community, all that different types of content. Boone has been doing a really good job with, and we've brought him on board to do some of that. And so we would definitely want to use, have him do some more videos for us and continue to expand content like that. And we're always open to working with other builders and other YouTube creators for other types of content, because then you can just create all sorts of cool new stuff. As far as bringing back the podcast is concerned, we've had some people mention that to us. The podcast it took a lot of time as far as scheduling, as I'm sure you're familiar with doing this show. It takes time to schedule people, and then sitting down and actually recording the whole thing and all of that all takes a lot of time. That as I have I'm working on my master's degree right now, as well as doing all of the YouTube stuff with John. And so there just wasn't time left to continue doing the podcast like we would have wanted. So we kind of phased that out and just focused on doing the in-person interviews at conventions. So no plans to bring that back in the near future, but I think, you have a wonderful show going here. So it's really cool to see that you and some of the other builders out there in the community have continued creating this type of long form kind of podcast content.
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's always good to see discussion happening, and that's really what I look for in this. So, okay, that's perfectly reasonable. Now, as I mentioned in the title, and this is something that we should discuss, I feel let's not keep people waiting. Let's keep it a little earlier in the show. We're almost about halfway. Let's branch into this because we talked a little bit about going to these conventions, going to, you said, the RFLM meetups, or even the LUG meetups over in Billund. And Billund is really what I want to discuss next. You guys are hosting possibly one of the most ambitious LEGO contests, raffles. I'm not exactly sure what the proper terminology would be here. Go ahead and tell us a little bit more about sending someone to the LEGO house in Billund.
Yes, I would love to tell you more about that. So John and I, occasionally, we're always talking about sort of new ideas for different things we could work on, whether it's types of videos or contests or anything like that. And some of the ideas are kind of crazy and would never really work. Some of them are crazy, but we still pursue them anyway. And this might be one of those ideas here. So we have a contest going right now where it's called Lego Reimagined. And the idea is that you reimagine a Lego set. And so basically you're just taking an official Lego set and reimagining it in some way. You can take the pieces and turn it into some other build. You can incorporate it into a larger layout. You can make it tiny. You can make it bigger. Anything you can do as long as you basically just take a set and reimagine it. We wanted to leave that pretty wide open as far as how people would reimagine the set that they chose. Mm-hmm. And so that's the contest. It ends the end of April here, and the prize is the first place prize is a trip, all expenses paid trip to the Lego House in Billund, as well as the Scareback Fan Weekend convention that takes place there every September. So you'll get to go to the convention there in Scareback in Denmark, as well as go to the Lego House and visit Billund, Denmark as well. So that's the first place prize. And then the second and third place prizes are some of the exclusive Lego House and Lego Tree sets that are only available from the Lego House as well. So yeah, we're really excited for this. It was really fun to put together, and we're all about kind of facilitating travel to conventions, particularly between like different parts of the world. So like, Americans making it to European shows. Maybe if this goes well, we'd like to get some people coming to the U.S. shows from outside the U.S. So anything like that, I'm a big fan of, and trying to facilitate that travel and going to different conventions and having those new experiences for people around the world. I think is really great. So that's kind of our big goal with the contest. And yeah, I can't wait to see all the different entries that people put in there.
That, like I said, that is incredibly ambitious. But all right, so contest is the correct terminology because there's a building aspect to it. Now, a certain individual we may be familiar with, Kevin A. Hinkle. He's in the live chat right now mentioning that you guys have some sick promotional graphic assets in addition to having master builder judges. Would you mind elaborating?
Yes. First off, yeah, Kevin designed some amazing promotional graphics for us to kind of get the word out there about the show. So shout out to Kevin for that. Really great work. We always love working with Kevin on any of those types of projects. But then also, another thing involving Kevin is two of the judges that we have helping us judge the entries into the contest is Kevin Hinkle as well as Alice Finch, who is a super talented builder out in Seattle, Washington. And so they will both be helping us kind of narrow down to a few great entries that we will choose from for the winners. So yeah, they're helping us with the contest and can't wait to have them give their professional input once the contest ends.
Wow. Okay, now I fail to see how you would find better eyes for judging this contest. That's fantastic. Okay, now are there any parameters that aspiring builders or entrants to this contest should be aware of? Anything that they can't do? Anything that is being really encouraged? Is there anything that get them disqualified?
So a few things to note. Major things is you have to be over 18, just because we are sending someone outside of the country, and so we wanted to make sure that they were over 18 and that wouldn't have any issues there. So that's important to note. You do have to be living in the United States as well for this contest. So for this one, we're only sending someone from the U.S. since it's a show in Europe. We might do some more contests in the future where we bring people outside the U.S. into a show like Brickworld or something. We'll see. Hopefully, we could do things like that in future years. But yeah, so over 18 and living in the U.S. and then no like digital entries allowed. So it has to be built with physical bricks. That's an important point.
Mm-hmm.
That's yeah. So no digital entries into the contest.
LDD, none of that.
Right, exactly. Just built physical bricks. Beyond that, it's pretty much all up to you as far as within the parameters of that Lego Reimagined, using a set in some different way. Like I mentioned, there's not a lot of restrictions outside of that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that seems fairly open. I totally understand how it's a bit difficult to work outside of the country one is based in, so that makes sense. I understand that there was a bit of disappointment from international fans, but it sounds like you guys are working to kind of rectify that in the future, so perfectly understandable.
Definitely.
Yeah. I would like to remind everyone, given that this is live, feel free to head on over to Twitter using the hashtag the Eljay Johnsen Show at the Eljay Johnsen and ask any questions you would like us to get to before the end of the show. Go ahead, head on over there, fire away. And we actually do have at least one email question, and I'm sure you may know who sent it. So, that's pretty fantastic. I'll ask, regarding yourself, do you personally do any mocking?
I have not done much recently. When I was younger, I used to do more building. I had more time to just kind of sit around with the Lego collection and work on builds. But these days, I consider my mocks the videos we created at Lego shows. So that's
I like that distinction.
That's the creations I'm working on these days. Is all the content from conventions. So yeah, I've never been a huge mock builder. I have built definitely some mocks over the years, but I'd say I've predominantly approached the hobby from more of a sort of set builder collector standpoint. Having building the sets and displaying them I think is cool, and with some mocks sprinkled in here and there, but predominantly a set builder.
Fair enough. I'm the exact same way, so I can completely relate. So fair enough. Okay. So, let's kind of talk a bit about, in a sense, the meta regarding to Beyond the Brick. And we touched upon getting into it earlier. What would be some advice? Let's say you're talking to yourself at a much younger age. You've gone back in time. You said, all right, listen, Joshua, mini Joshua. we need to. I'm gonna give you some advice to how to progress this much faster. What advice would you give to aspiring members of the LEGO community that want to make content like this, that want to be involved in lugs, in RFLMs, to get involved more heavily in the LEGO community and make content and get involved with builders?
I would say one great way to start out is the internet and just staying involved online. So particularly if you want to try to sort of meet other builders and get involved with other people building mocks and AFOLs, going on Flickr or Instagram or wherever they might be posting their content, even if they post, YouTube videos of what they're building, and commenting on there, kind of starting a dialogue that way is a really excellent way to get to meet people. That's something, in the early days of the show, we were active on Flickr and, contacting builders that way about coming on the show, commenting on builders' photos and keeping up with what people were building. So wherever the platform is, I know Flickr is maybe not used quite as much now by the LEGO community as other platforms has popped up. So wherever your favorite builders or people you want to follow are posting their content online, kind of starting a dialogue on there with them and getting to know them better online is a great way to do that. And then also, I think probably the number one thing is if you can make it to a convention, it's just such an incredible experience. There's nothing quite like going to a LEGO convention and just seeing all of these incredible builds on display, but most of all, meeting all of the incredible builders there and realizing how nice and supportive they are and how willing they are to give you tips on building and chat about what they do and everything. So just if you can at all make it to convention, whatever the closest convention to you might be, I would highly recommend that, because that to me, when we started going to more conventions and meeting builders there and recording more videos, that to me is when the channel really started to take off, as well as I started to get more and more involved in the community as well, and was able to chat with people and everything, found it all much more interesting. So conventions are a huge part of the community, in my opinion. And then if you're just interested in creating more content on YouTube, say if you're a LEGO YouTuber, there's definitely one of the biggest tips that I always give, and I think is what I've learned from our experience of doing this for almost about 7 years now, is just patience is a huge part of it. As far as if you've got content out there that you're wanting people to find, if it's LEGO related content, whatever type of LEGO related content it might be on YouTube, if you're patient and continue to put out a good quality product and let people find that, I think that's a big deal. And just kind of wait for those 1 or 2 videos that then take off and people start to find your content more is a huge deal. So that's, I think, always my number one tip from what I've learned doing this over the years, is that if you're willing to continue to put in the work and are patient, that can pay off in the long term.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The great words of advice, perseverance, sticking with it, and getting involved are very important aspects of actually growing and making a lot of intertwined content. That is really good. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I figure, also in addition to that, because this is something that you and I briefly discussed right before the show started, and it's a challenge that I myself have run into. So I come from a very construction heavy background, being on BZ Power, the largest Bionicle fan site, and being a moderator and member of the TTV channel, and so on and so forth. Bionicle, Ninjago, well, kind of Ninjago, Chima, so on and so forth. For someone who comes from a certain community, because the LEGO communities are very fascinating that they have individual communities, and they kind of revolve around each other, but there isn't often a lot of crossover. What would you recommend for individuals who come from a particular background that want to really start to get into other themes, want to get interested in other different LEGO communities?
So I would start by looking at, say you're, in your case, you're a Bionicle builder and you want to start building in city or space or one of the other, big LEGO themes, castle or something out there. I would start by looking at what other, AFOLs and talented builders are building in that theme. Whether it's photos online, if you can make it to convention, visit that spend time in that area of the convention talking to those builders who are building in, the theme that you want to get more involved in, and just kind of start to see the techniques that they use in their builds and kind of the pieces that they use and find useful for putting together a castle or greebling on a spaceship or whatever it might be you want to get involved in. I think that's a really good way to start to transition from just, if you grew up with Bionicle or grew up with one particular theme and want to expand out. If you talk to those builders and look at their builds online or in person, you can start to get a really good idea of how those different pieces are used to come together for that particular theme. So that's a great way to do that as far as getting out there and meeting new builders, because like you said, it is one of the sort of unfortunate side effects, I guess, of the Lego community getting so large. I'd say in the last 10 years here. Mm-hmm. It's great on the one hand because there's been a lot of new people joining the community and you have a lot of new builders, but you've also had kind of individual fan groups then form around these different themes, and there's not always a lot of this overlap between all the different themes and all the different builders kind of coming together like there was in the very early days when it was a much smaller community and everyone could interact a lot easier. So it is important to kind of go across, I don't want to say like party lines here, but just that makes it sound worse than it is. But kind of reaching out and building in all different themes. And that's some of the builders that always impress me the most when I'm at a show is a builder who has, some incredible builds featured in every theme at a convention or something, and they can build in all different styles and different themes and everything. I always think that's really amazing, and some of the best builders can do that.
Yeah, like just off the top of my head, one of the individuals I would think of would be my last guest, Anthony Wilson, who he dabbles in construction and system building, and even to a degree he kind of mixes the two. And so yeah, no, I absolutely agree. That is such an impressive aspect of being able to be in all different forms of building. All right, that's some great advice. So this is a very insightful episode, so I really appreciate, once again, you coming on and answering these questions.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. Yeah, I love chatting.
Fantastic. All right, let's get into a couple of questions here. We actually do have an email question, and in a moment I'll also open up the live chat for questions, and Twitter is, of course, still always open. These questions come from, guess who, the man, the myth, the legend, Kevin A. Hinkle. And he has two questions. First of all, and I think we kind of sort of touched upon this, he asks, what's your next big goal for the channel?
That's a good question, and I don't know. So this is something, and this kind of comes down, I guess, to my philosophy behind the way I work and create content. I'm not a super sort of goal-oriented type person as far as, again, we chatted about how I first started the show, where I just kind of sent out cold call emails and just was like, is anyone interested in doing this with me? I never sat down and was like, okay, I'm going to start the show, and by this point I'm going to have this many viewers, and I want to accomplish this. I guess my personality and my way of thinking is more, I just want to kind of create cool content, and whatever the best way to do that is the way I'll go down. We'll just kind of continue down that path and see where that takes us. So I've never been a big set big goals type of person and see where we can go in the future. So I wouldn't say there's any major goal beyond the continuing just to do what we've done as far as hit as many conventions as possible, hit new conventions, and try to show the work of as many builders as possible on the channel and get their work out there to as many people as we can. That, I guess, would be the main goal right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's perfectly understandable. All right, and his next question is, have you considered experimenting with reapproaching one-on-one builder interviews amongst your event coverage, similar to, quote, the old days, end quote?
Okay, so I'm assuming that's along the lines of the podcast type of thing, that I sort of longer form type of one-on-one sort of stuff, I'm assuming is what he's referencing there. So again, like we sort of mentioned, as far as the podcast, I enjoyed doing that, and it was great. We did almost 175 episodes or something of that show. So it went for a number of years, and talked to a lot of different fantastic builders all over the world. But yeah, it just kind of comes down to the whole time factor with the convention coverage, and then my schooling just don't have time to kind of find the builders and then host all of that and the time to record and everything right now. So that's why we're focusing on the convention coverage. But yeah, that I did certainly enjoy doing the podcast, and it was a great way to get kind of a lot of in-depth information from builders at the very early days when I just started out in the community and really had no clue what was going on. You know, interviewing, we had Kevin Hinkle on fairly early in the show, and interviewing people like him and getting their thoughts on the community and everything just really helped me understand a lot better of what the Lego community was doing and where it was headed and everything. So I certainly enjoyed doing that, but right now I think we're good where we are.
Okay, fair enough. Then there you go. And Kevin is in the chat to elaborate if need be, and he does mention, he said a very good point earlier, in which there are other podcasts now as opposed to back then. You guys were almost a monopoly once upon a time, which to me, that is an actually excellent point, because I remember helping start the TTV podcast, and there was like nothing much else, and that was in 2010. So it's been a while, and podcasts, those have become a lot more popular, a lot more mainstream in a sense. You'll hear about even a lot of non-Lego individuals starting podcasts, like the H3H3 podcast and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that is a really good point.
For sure, yeah. So it's there's so much more, you know, content, Lego related content being created on YouTube, especially now. When we first started out, YouTube there was not a lot of people doing stuff. You had a couple big kind of set reviewer channels and stuff, but there's just so much more now, which is great because there's so many different avenues and so many different YouTubers people can follow now. There's content for everybody out there. But I do want to mention that, I don't know if you're familiar with them. The original, as far as I know, the sort of original Lego podcast was the Lego and More Lego LAML radio show. I don't know if you've listened to any of their episodes from like 2007, 2008. Was sort of the original Lego podcast.
That rings a bell. Like in the back of my head, I recall it.
Yeah, it was some great stuff, and that was definitely some of the I listened to a lot of those episodes before I started Beyond the Brick, and definitely some inspiration from their content as far as I think the original Lego podcast and interviewing builders and stuff. Their episodes are still out there on iTunes, and I think you can still find them online. Some really great interviews with builders from the early days of the community, like Chris Giddens and people like that. So that, as far as I know, was, you know, thinking back over the history of Lego podcasts, like you were saying, I think was kind of the original, and they had some great stuff that was definitely inspirational for my own show.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to go back and look that up and kind of give that a thorough listening to, because that sounds really good. I completely if I hadn't seen it, then I completely forgot. So that's a fair point. Okay. We'll go ahead and open up the chat, live chat. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them now. So in the meantime, I'll go ahead and continue conversing about a few other things. This might seem like a little odd question, but do you have a least favorite Lego line? Current or prior, doesn't matter. If it's Bionicle, feel free. It's okay. I'm used to it.
I can go with the easy answer of like Galador, but I don't know if that's my least favorite Lego line. I'm definitely more of a system builder, so I will say the construction type lines. I don't want to offend anyone out there, and I know there's some really dedicated fans. They just have not appealed to me as much over the years. So Bionicle, I appreciated when I was younger, I found the storyline of Bionicle interesting. Some of the comics and that type of thing, and some of the story. I just never got into the builds themselves. They just never really did anything for me. And then as far as future, the more recent construction lines as well, like Hero Factory and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So as a rule, I would say those types of lines are probably my least favorite, just because they don't incorporate nearly as easily with other Lego themes as system stuff does, and so it wasn't adding those to the collection didn't add a lot of sort of pieces and things that I could use in other builds if I was working on a mock. So because of that, the construction type themes are probably among my least favorite of the Lego themes.
Okay, that makes sense. Like I said, I'm used to that answer, so fair enough. I totally understand, because even while I've often made the defense that they're still like compatible, I can definitely admit that they're not as easily integrated to system as, well, system would be, or even Duplo. So that's
right.
Yeah.
They're definitely compatible, and I've seen some incredible builders, far more talented than I am, that can incorporate the pieces really nicely and do some great builds with them. But from I guess a beginner's, more rookie level, if you're just working on some simpler builds, then it's much harder to incorporate those construction pieces. But I will say again that there are some incredibly talented Bionicle builders and everything out there, and we featured some of those builds on the show over the years, and interviewed some of them at conventions. But there is definitely some great stuff out there. So it's not like I consider it like a fake theme or fake Lego or anything like that.
Goodness,
I know some people, I don't go that far. It's just not for me.
Yeah, then that makes sense. Everyone has a preference, and there's always a reason to it, of course. All right. We do have some questions here. Kevin asks, out of the events you've attended, which is your favorite?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, come on, Kevin. How could you ask that? Oh.
No, I like every show, but I do generally say that my favorite is Brick World Chicago for a number of reasons. It was the first show I ever went to. I live in Indiana, so it's kind of the closest big show to me. So there's definitely a bit of that nostalgia factor there, going back every year to Brick World, since it was the first show I ever experienced. It's also one of the biggest as far as like just layout space. I think that and Brick Fair, Virginia are very close as far as like how much space there is for layouts. Mm-hmm. So you just get a crazy amount of builds there every year. There's so much to look at. Actually, like too much. You can't possibly experience all the builds in the weekend that the show runs. There's so much incredible stuff there. I also love I think there's just a ton of talented builders that show up there, and especially the collaboratives. I feel like Brick World Chicago has more like really big, impressive collaborative builds usually than other shows do. So I think most famously is Virtual Lug. If you've seen any of their work, they come together at Brick World. That's the one show where they meet up every year and have done some just insane collaborative displays over the years there. So there's a few different reasons there. That certainly isn't saying that I love all the shows we go to are really incredible, and I enjoy them all. But I think for a few different reasons there, probably a lot of the nostalgia connected because it was my first show. I think Brick World Chicago is the one I prefer.
Okay, fair enough. I can understand that answer. Yeah, like, for instance, I would say Brick Fair, Virginia, which is incredibly biased because it's the only Lego convention I've been to, so fair enough.
Well, there you go.
All right, some other questions from Happy Brick 1985. They ask, thoughts on Lego board games and Lego ideas?
Okay, yeah, so Lego board games, there have been some good ones over the years. I think an old one, I want to say, was it called Creationary? It was like one of the original Lego board games that you had. I don't know if you've ever seen a copy of that or are familiar with that game. But it was one of the early, I believe, Lego board games that you kind of moved around the board and collected different pieces to work on a build that you were trying to finish. Mm-hmm. I believe was the goal of the game. So that was fun. I remember playing that growing up. And then they had the whole line of Lego games with the sort of brick-built dice and everything there. That line, I picked up a few of those just because they had some cool pieces in them, but overall didn't seem too interesting. I don't know if I ever actually sat down and played, like, by the rules, one of those games very many times. But there were some really cool pieces, and, like, the tiny, small, like, micros, pretty tiny minifig guys that would come in a lot of those different games were pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think Lego has done some interesting stuff in the board game area over the years, but not. I feel like they haven't really done a ton of stuff. It'll be interesting to see if they branch out more there in future years. But there has been some good stuff there. as far as Lego Ideas, I'm a huge fan of Ideas and the sets that it's brought out. I think it's just fantastic that Lego is allowing fans to submit their designs like that, and allowing the fan builders to be able to give their input on what Lego should make. I was just at Bricks Cascade a couple weeks ago, and they the builder of the ship in the bottle set was there, Jake Sadovich, and was able to sit down with him, and he had his original fan built model there, which is much larger than the set that Lego actually released. And so I sat down with him, and we did a video that we'll have up here at some point in the next few weeks, having him talk about kind of his original inspiration for the build, and kind of his experience working with Lego Ideas and everything, and then comparing it to the set that was finally released. So I think it's really cool. And there's a lot of cool sets that have been released through that. I generally am not too much into the sort of IP related ones they've done. So like, I don't know, the Big Bang Theory or Ghostbusters, ones like that don't interest me a ton. I think the more interesting ones are things like the ship in the bottle or the bird set. Sets like that I think are the coolest stuff to come out of Ideas.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Honestly, to this very moment, I cannot fathom nor figure out how in the world the Big Bang Theory got approved for a Lego set. I can't.
It is a mystery, isn't it?
It is. It just. Well, then again, I also can't figure out The Simpsons. So fair enough.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's true. Something I guess some things you just don't get. I don't know. That's just how it is.
Yeah, I mean, for fans of both of those, I'm very happy. I also partially grew up on Simpsons, so it's like, oh yeah, Lego Simpsons. And I know family members that really, really love the minifigures, especially because of the likenesses. But I'm perplexed. But also, yeah, regarding the board game Creationary, came out in 2009, 338 pieces for a rough retail of $35. So I've never seen this before. This is quite honestly the first time I've seen it, and this is a little bit, I'm going to send you a link here. This is a little bit of a haunting kind of cover here. I'll also send this in the live chat.
Yes, I see it. Okay.
It's a little bit, I don't want to use the term abstract, maybe uncanny valley.
So there's that one, and then the one actually, the image I had in my head is an even older one that is sort of pretty similar to that. That might be basically a more updated version of the one when I was even younger. I want to say it was probably released like early 2000s, maybe even 90s possibly, that was similar to that game before that kind of line of Lego games came out with the Lego dice and all that, that was similar to that. But yeah, so that sort of thing is what I had in mind though.
Let me see. I'm going to quickly look up
yeah, I can't remember if it was also called Creationary, but I just remember playing that when I was younger as one of the first kind of Lego board gaming experiences I had.
Yeah. I can't see anything on Brickset at the very least past 2007, so they're certainly possible that they don't have it, which I don't. It happens, but yeah, no. I'm not very well versed in Lego board games, so chalk this one up.
No, that's understandable.
Not being familiar.
On the topic of games, though, real quick, another thing that I thought of it because I actually have the box sitting behind me here on the studio backdrop is this game called Lego Treasure Quest, which was a tie-in with the like Johnny Thunder Adventures line, and it's not a board game, but if you look that up real quick, you can probably find images of the box online. It's like an electronic scavenger hunt game. So you'd basically like take these little like plastic key pieces, hide them all over your house, and then everybody would go running and searching all over the house and find these keys, and you would bring it back and unlock this Lego treasure chest piece that would have like the prize inside or whatever. Which wow. I have no idea where this game came from. I think it was something, again, I had when I was pretty young and tied in with the like Johnny Thunder Adventures theme, and it's just something I grew up playing, but was always kind of a fun, interesting Lego related game.
Wow, no kidding. I'm taking a look at that now. Lego Treasure Quest, electronic scavenger hunt game. That has a lot of involvement to it. That's impressive. And
Yeah.
I've never seen this before.
It was something, yeah. I remember playing that with my siblings a lot growing up and running all over the house and
Wow.
looking for all the different keys that we would hide. So it was quite the game.
That is crazy. Wow. I see. This is why I like doing this. I learn things every time, and so this I'll take this away and be like, wow, I've never seen this. That's crazy. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna be wrapping up here in just a few moments. Joshua, firstly, I'd like to thank you once again for being on and taking the time to talk with me and talk to everyone about Beyond the Brick, the contest you guys are running, and all sorts of things in between. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, LJ. I really appreciate you having me on. This has been fantastic. I always love chatting about Lego and about Beyond the Brick and the community online. So this has been a lot of fun as well.
Absolutely. Are there any words of wisdom? I mean, not that you already haven't given plenty, or something you'd like to impart upon anyone listening to this? As if they don't take anything else away, what's the one thing you really would like to impart with them?
I think that the number one thing that I've learned over the years as being a part of the LEGO community and that I would impart to other people is just always look for opportunities to be supportive of other builders and other members of the LEGO community, because it can make a big difference. And there have been a lot of people who are fantastic builders now that would not be where they are today without the support and the advice of builders that were there before them. So I think my number one piece of advice and maybe wisdom, if I've learned anything doing this over the years, is always look for opportunities to support other builders and support the content that people are making, if it's on YouTube, wherever it might be, and help them to continue to grow over the years.
All right. Those, like I said, you've already given plenty, but those are excellent words of advice. And I hope everyone listening can take that away and enjoy that and get into the community and get involved, because that's is a lot of fun. I think everyone can agree that if everyone's having fun, then it's a time well spent.
Exactly.
All right. In that case, are there any places on social media that you would like people to follow you at? Whichever ones you want me to link below, feel free to let me know.
Yeah, so you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're all Beyond the Brick on there. And then just the YouTube URL is youtube.com/BeyondTheBrickTV. So any of those social media sites, we put out a lot. The social media is great to follow us if you want to see more of the behind-the-scenes convention experience, because we typically put, the interviews and everything we record at conventions on the YouTube channel, but we'll also put a lot of photos and sort of behind-the-scenes stuff on our social media while we're at these shows. So if you want to get more of a behind-the-scenes glimpse at what we do, then following us on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram is a great way to see that.
Okay, and real quick, how do people sign up and get involved in the contest? Where do they go for that?
The contest is through we have a Flickr group for entries there, and so I'm sure you can link to that as well, LJ. There's also a video on the YouTube channel we made that lays out the contest and has a link to that as well in the description. So if you watch that video or go to the Lego Reimagined Flickr group that we have for entries, that's the best way to enter.
All right, fantastic. All of this will be in the description below, so please, I highly encourage and recommend everyone to go check everything there out. You will not fail to be entertained. I can guarantee it. And if you're a Lego enthusiast, it's the place to be. All right, well, once again, Joshua, I really appreciate it. I'd love to have you on again to talk about practically anything you would like, if you have the time, of course.
Yes, we'll have to do this again sometime, LJ. This has been great.
Sure,
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Heck, maybe we can even bring, I don't know, maybe a certain Kevin on, and maybe he can join, and maybe we'll have just a fun conversation.
That's right, Mr. Crispy Bacon himself.
Yeah, hashtag Crispy Bacon. All right, in that case, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all very much for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to send them over via email. Just send them to eljjohnson@gmail.com. And if you want any updates to the show and just a good time, as well as guest announcements every Tuesday, head on over to Twitter @the Eljay Johnsen. So once again, thank you all so very much for listening, be it live or recorded when this episode goes up. really, really soon, let me tell you. And we will see you all next week, next Saturday at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So thank you all so very much for listening one more time, and we'll see you all then. Have a great day.